Welcome everyone. Today is the 7th of March and I'm gonna talk about Christopher Luxon's State of the Nation speech, or what he held on Sunday, the 5th of March. It included very important talking points, which surprised me as well, and they were all relevant. And altogether, the 25-minute speech was important in terms of understanding what Luxon thinks the next election will be about and what he's gonna bring to the table so voters can decide. Okay, let's jump into it. Now, the main theme, unfortunately, was party politics, in which he mentioned that Labour has a new prime minister, but actually it is the same team, and his proof is that the Prime Minister Chris Hipkins was part of Jacinda Ardern's inner circle. Now that is true, and it is even more truer because recently Labour did such an embarrassing U-turn again on road infrastructure policy, which reminded me of their tax U-turn in August 2022. And to be fair, it seems Chris Hipkins wants to lose this election as well. They shouldn't do such mishaps in policy. Once they believe a policy is right, please carry it out, otherwise there is no leadership in this country. Now, the second point Luxon mentioned, the bloated bureaucracy, which is unresponsive, expensive, and relies heavily on consultants. Now, that is very, very true, and it's insightful to mention that altogether it became expensive since 2017 compared to how large it was in 2017. The bureaucracy is about 50% larger in terms of payments on bureaucrats' salaries. However, altogether the bureaucracy doesn't account more than 20% of all the salaries in the country, which is small compared to other OECD countries. So it's still not large enough. If the government wants to deliver services, they have to employ people. However, the flip side of it, even though the bureaucracy was boosted, they cancelled many performance-related indicators what they had to comply with. For example, I know the bureaucracy of the immigration settings. I am a migrant here as well, and it was frustrating that although migrants had to pay a lot for residency fees, there were no deadline for the government to process the applications, and that is a big limbo. I believe anyone who pays for a service should expect that within a reasonable amount of time, let's say 90 days, 180 days, the application will be assessed and most likely approved. But there is no such time in New Zealand, and it is only because Labour cancelled these performance indicators. So this problem is very true. Now, the too much talk, less action is also true. Those who watched the videos about Jacinda Ardern's imposter syndrome, I mentioned that imposter syndrome might lead to perfectionism, and perfectionism can lead to over planning things and eventually not doing anything. This government inherited that feature from the imposter who was in charge. Uh, Another talking point by Luxon, that the government spends much time on things that people don't really care about. And he mentioned the cycle bridge in Auckland, co-governance agenda, the Television New Zealand and Radio New Zealand merger. Yeah, he might have mentioned planning the hate speech law, but yeah, I am not his advisor. He might have done a better job, but anyway. In party politics, Luxon mentioned Labour's tax addiction too. It is true. Nevertheless, I'm not sure if it is only just the Labour Party policy, because traditionally taxes are very odd in New Zealand. Sometimes GST is paid on taxes too. The property rate, which is the local government's main income, is also taxed by GST. So it's a tax on a tax. It's a tradition. It's not just the labor tax addiction. However, we can say that yeah, labor is tax addicted. Moving on, there were two main talking points for Luxon beside party politics. One of them was focus on the economy, and yeah, it was him who forced the government to pay attention to the cost of living crisis from the beginning of 2022. And now, concerning the cost of living crisis, he mentioned that Kiwis feel like they lost control over their finances and their lives. He might have thought about the rising mortgage payments. However, I haven't seen any trace in his speech to talk about the precariat and the problems of the flexible labor markets. I believe the precariat, the group of people who do not who do not have reliable and secured income and jobs, they constitute the precariat, and their proportion within the labor force is somewhere between 30 and 50%. That's a huge number. And even though Luxon mentioned the dependable income concept, I haven't seen any willingness from the National Party to address the insecure job conditions. Yeah, that will be a big thing to address, because job security would mean that more people would be willing to go to work, and there would be no such thing as lack of labor. It's nonsense. Yeah, jobs are problematic. Impossible shifts and impossible long hours. Oh, yeah, there are many jobs unfilled. I agree, but they are not good jobs. That's the problem, and it's not a surprise that the consumer confidence and business confidence is low. No surprise at all due to the flexible labor market conditions. Now, this statistics actually shocked me, that 4 times more kids are living in cars than 5 years ago. It's shocking. Altogether, the number of people who sleep rough, the homeless people, is somewhere between 40 and 50,000. But the number of kids living in cars, oh, that's shocking. I believe it, still shocking. Now, another problem, that young men often feel that the job seeker support is an entitlement, and they don't seek employment. Yeah, again, I would point back to the problems of the flexible labor market and the precarious working conditions. Those problems should be addressed, and not people who need the job seeker support should be attacked. However, this is national preference. Okay. Uh, Luxon used this concept, the squeezed middle. Yeah, they are taxed, and usually they pay most of the tax that serves as basis for welfare transfers. However, this concept is itself problematic. Once we squeeze the middle class, they become lower class. So it's an oxymoron. There is no such thing. Yeah, Nicola Willis found this term. Well, I believe National should pay attention to appoint an economist for finance spokesperson. Nicola Willis has a degree in English literature, and journalism. Okay, I'm not surprised. Luxon mentioned the MI blunder again that led New Zealand's isolation internationally. Well, I don't know why he mentioned that. It might have been a problem earlier, but it's not a problem at the moment. It shouldn't be. And altogether, because of the cost of living crisis, as a consequence, people feel frustration and they believe things are going to the wrong direction. Now, there were no new polls after the enactment of Chris Hipkins to Prime Minister, but he realigned Labour's focus on the cost of living problems this year. And after he quite proactively managed the cyclone damage, Gabriel, I think the opinion polls might show a different picture. It's just my intuition. It's a hunch. I don't know properly, but this might not be true by now. Okay. Beside the economy, luckily, Luxon talked about other risk factors, geopolitical tensions, and the effects of climate change, and how it creates the feeling of vulnerability in New Zealand. Meanwhile, the main perception of the people here was that the country was actually resilient. Now, it's okay to raise this point, and it's okay to prepare the public for different approach to secure the people from the effects of climate change. Yes, but I don't think people felt resilience before, because there were earthquakes, for example the 2010 Christchurch earthquake, and also disasters like the Pike River mine explosion in 2011. And well, people are aware that there are dangers in the nature, and I don't think this kind of perception changed. Now, what was important is Luxon mentioned the problems of the healthcare system and the education system. Concerning healthcare, he mentioned the impossibly long wait times. Now, it is true. For example, for 1 year and a half, I haven't seen my GP. I just contacted the nurse through the telephone, and there was no examination in my cases when I had to stay home because of sickness. And I just can't accept why this is the case, why this is impossible to get a GP appointment when someone is sick. It's unacceptable. Concerning education, yeah, during the last 20 years, Kiwis got worse results in literacy and numeracy skills. Yeah, but blaming all this on Chris Hipkins, who was Minister of Education for 5 years of this 20, and I can tell because I am an academic and I know the system, I know what students want from the education system, and I know my former mates who are overseas in Great Britain and in Asia. The problems are much more complex. With the advancement of the internet, less and less people are interested in studying at universities, and when we going into younger ages, we can see that actually the COVID crisis made it even more impossible to convince them to go to school, because during the lockdowns it was okay to stay at home for an extensive period of time. It's just not that easy that absenteeism become very high all of a sudden. No, it was a much longer process, and I don't think National understands it. Also importantly, Luxon mentioned the crime wave. Yeah, cost of living crisis brings about crime, unfortunately. Yeah, and he also mentioned positive things about New Zealand. He characterized the nation as a modern multicultural nation with strong bicultural foundations. Now, we don't yet know what it means precisely, but it might be a hint that the co-governance agenda will be completely repealed by National if they get elected. It is crucial, and actually it is logical. I would support this idea. However, I don't agree fully with him on how he characterized Kiwis, namely they are determined, creative, innovative and resourceful. Well, determined, not really. They can be enthusiastic for various projects, but if it goes south, they lose enthusiasm very quickly. Creative, well, to be fair, King George confirmed this to me, that the creative and innovative part of New Zealand, which still had the number 8 wire mentality, which is a can-do approach, is actually dying away with the older generations. So people are not that creative at the moment. Not now. They are aging out. And concerning whether the country is resourceful, well, if people are losing control over their lives, I can't tell that they are resourceful. It's a bit of an inconsistency. But anyway, yeah, he wanted to talk positively about the waters. That's fine. After this appraisal, Luxon composed 5 goals: curbing the cost of living crisis, lifting incomes for all, resilient infrastructure. This might be new because this got in after the cyclone Gabriel. Restoring law and order, yes, to address crime problems. Better health and education, yeah, it was expected. Now, what actual steps they plan to do to achieve these goals? Well, curbing the cost of living crisis, they already mentioned the Welfare That Works program, which is a penalization of young ones who receive job seeker support but don't go to work. Like I said, resolving the flexible labor market conditions would help much more than penalizing young ones who just don't want to go into how shall I put this attribute, problematic jobs. Okay. The second program point would be stopping additional costs on businesses. Well, a party which is interested in developing business could be a bit more ambitious on this one. It's not just their costs, no, it's also their options to innovate. Now, the third point, the Reserve Bank mandate should be modified so the Reserve Bank would focus only on decreasing and inflation and price stability. That's a problematic one because the balance between unemployment and price stability was implemented into the Reserve Bank's mandate by this government, and I believe it is just an acknowledgement of the theoretical arguments that yes, there is not just a theoretical but an empirical connection between the level of unemployment and inflation, and removing this is irresponsible. Bill Mitchell, one of the promoters of the modern monetary theory, writes extensively about why it is a problem to focus on reducing inflation. Inflation is just a number, and once we compensate people with their income, with their salaries, with their wages, or with their benefits for inflation, actually we looked after them. But governments, rather than focusing on decreasing inflation, they should focus on providing more secure jobs for people, and that's the main agenda of the modern monetary theory. In this respect, I agree with it. There are problematic parts of that theory, but yes, I do believe that inflation is not the real problem. Unemployment is. So it's a mistaken policy. I will counter argue if I have the chance. Now, removing bottlenecks, that's a good one, because why does the country have cost of living crisis? Because there was a negative productivity shock. And how do we resolve negative productivity shocks? Address all those problems, the bottlenecks that caused it. Yeah, that's a good policy. Details are not known, but hopefully they find it. Discipline government spending, well, it's not new. Actually, Labour implemented after the recommendation of the Green Party that altogether income redistribution cannot be higher than 30% of the GDP. That's kind of a disciplined government spending. I wouldn't think it's anything new. Actually, I don't think why they stick to this 30%. Statistics show that wealthy countries have larger income distribution, for example the Scandinavian countries, so it shouldn't be a problem at all. Now, lifting incomes for all, National would use indexing the tax brackets, and now they provided details about the Family Boost program, which would serve as 25% tax rebate after the spending on early childhood education centers. It's a good policy, but I would extend it, providing completely free education from early childhood centers until universities, including universities. So, okay, it's a good policy in itself, but why not expand it further? Local water done well to provide the resilient infrastructure. Well, there should be more about it. It's not just the replacement of the Three Waters Act. Resilient infrastructure would need better roads and better telecommunication networks. Okay, restoring law and order would be assisted by backing police to stop gangs access weapons, and punishment of recurring criminals into youth military academies. Well, okay, they can try. Whether it would deter young ones from committing crime, I'm not so sure. Now, there was no details how health and education sector will be improved. Hopefully we will hear more about it soon. Now, as an assessment, I should emphasize that I found positives in this speech. One of the positives was that Luxon talked very shortly about global issues, and it was an acknowledgement that yeah, New Zealand people, the Kiwis, are indeed inward looking, and that's okay. Yeah. Sorry. He used the words dependable income and the desire to control over family finances. Yeah, hopefully this openness may lead to addressing the precarious working conditions. That would be a good start. I don't know if that's gonna happen. Hopefully. He provided details about a good policy, the family boost. Yeah, maybe we should expect a bit more details later on. Yeah, but at least there were details. Now the final positive is a great one. He talked about himself, and he talked about what politicians should follow as leaders. They should achieve the potential of possible countries. Maybe he has read my book, and this book argues that yes, politicians' responsibility is to provide the best outcomes of the conditions. And coming back to Luxon, I like that he was committed to this role, and he talked about how he was often questioned, like why on earth he went to politics when he already got a good fortune and he became wealthy. He responded that he felt responsible to provide the best for the country. So it seems that Luxon clarified his own role identity. Yeah, he is over 50. By this time it's recommended to clarify for the person himself. Yes, but because he has this role identity, I talked about how Jacinda Ardern might not have anything similar yet. I don't think she has, but Luxon does have, and it's gonna be a huge strength when debating Chris Hipkins, because as I said earlier, Hipkins will struggle to create his own profile. Yeah, he doesn't have this kind of role identity. He doesn't know what he wants to achieve for the country. Luxon does know it, and in the debates of the election campaign, this will prove a huge advantage for Luxon. Mark my words for it. he might mop the floor with Hipkins, who is actually regarded a good speaker. But yeah, this role identity will fuel Luxon's confidence. Now, negatives. The first one is a pun from me. Okay, I have to admit, but it's relevant. In his speech, Luxon mentioned that Grant Robertson is collecting $48 billion more in a year in taxes. Now, okay, Grant Robertson is the Minister of Finance, but usually I say this to people in New Zealand, that once someone has a household and they are responsible for the incomes and the payments, the expenditure, they might prove a better finance minister than the finance minister itself, because in the government the role of the responsibility for spending is separated from the role of responsibility for collecting revenue. The revenue minister is David Parker, so it's not Grant Robertson who collects $48 billion more. Actually, this separation is silly, because how on earth can any minister be responsible for the spending when they don't know the struggles how to collect the revenue for the spending? It's crazy. The last finance minister who held both roles was Sir Michael Cullen between 1999 and 2008. After him, the roles were separated. Okay, coming back to the negatives. The only detailed program, the Family Boost, was only 400 million. Now, altogether, the government budget is more than $120 billion. So, this wasn't a big policy issue. And concerning big ones, yeah, although Luxon mentioned that the Labour government talked a lot about affordable housing, they didn't do much about it. Now, Luxon doesn't even talk about it. And a former student of mine, Nathan Mackenzie, warned me that because National doesn't have any track record on providing housing solutions, therefore it's gonna be quite incredible for them to develop such a policy. How would people believe them? No one knows. And yes, again, housing policy is not among the main goals. I don't know. But altogether, considering the positives and the negatives, so far it is still just a lukewarm campaign. Hopefully it's gonna fire up. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.